In 1932, an archaeologist in northern Iraq was told about some ruins behind a village called Jerwan. The village headman, a cautious old man named Ali, explained what they were. Local tradition said they were the remains of a dam. A German surveyor named Bachmann had looked at the same ruins in 1914 and concluded exactly the same thing. And Lloyd, the man who dug up Nineveh, who found the library of Ashurbanipal, had walked past them decades before that and given them a single sentence. 3 separate assessments, all of them wrong. And the thing that eventually corrected them was not a technique, or a new instrument, or a document in a European archive. It was a folk tale about 2 men competing to marry a princess. Start with what was actually there, because it explains why everyone got it wrong. Under the earth behind that village sat over 300 meters of cut limestone, 6 piers, 5 corbelled archways, a paved channel with parapets along the sides, breakwaters built to face an incoming stream, and a layer of concrete underneath the paving. The excavators, Thorkild, Jacobsen, and Seton Lloyd, working for the Oriental Institute, stated it plainly in their report. It is the oldest bridge of which remains are still extant anywhere on Earth. And they were careful about that claim. They footnote the competition, an earlier brick bridge at Susa that we know about only from an inscription, a temporary bridge of boats shown on Assyrian bronze gates, a king who repaired bridges rather than building them. Older bridges existed. This is the oldest one still standing. So why did 3 separate observers call it a dam? Because a bridge in the middle of dry farmland makes no sense. There is no river there now. If you are standing on a stone structure, spanning a valley with no water in it, and you have no inscription telling you otherwise, a dam is the sensible guess. They needed the inscription, and getting it was not dignified. The block carrying the text was found in a hole the villagers had been using as a dunghill, half full of filthy water. The epigraphers went down into it to copy the text, and while they were in there, working, the crowd of onlookers standing around the edge got bored. Somebody spotted a snake's tail sticking out of a nearby wall. They tied a string around it. 4 or 5 men took hold of the string and hauled, and snake and men came down into the hole on top of the epigraphers. Nobody was bitten. They finished the copy. But at that point, early in the dig, they only had fragments. They knew the text mentioned a bridge. They knew Sennacherib had caused something to pass over that bridge. And they assumed, reasonably, given who Sennacherib was, that the something was armies, troops and war chariots crossing a ravine. That is where the story stood when a doctor came to dinner. His name was Petros de Baz, and he was working in the area. He mentioned, in passing, that a few weeks earlier one of his patients had told him a story as soon as word got round that foreigners were coming to dig at Jerwan. The story went like this. A king had a beautiful daughter, and 2 suitors wanted to marry her. So, the king announced that he would give her to whichever of them first managed to bring water to the village of Tel Kaif. One suitor immediately began an enormous engineering project, and the ruins at Jerwan, the story says, still testify to how big it was. The other suitor did nothing. He sat in the coffee house all day. Then, when his rival's work was nearly finished, he went out and bought a huge quantity of white linen sheets. He spread them out on the ground near Tel Kaif, one beside another. From a distance, they looked like water. The first suitor saw them from far off, believed he had lost, and was struck down with such grief that he fell ill and died on the spot. The second suitor married the princess. Now watch what that story did. The excavators had been digging for 3 or 4 days. They had a fragmentary inscription about a bridge and something passing over it, and they thought that something was an army. The folk tale assumed the ruins were part of a canal, water, and Seton Lloyd made the leap. If the story is right that this was about carrying water, then the bridge is not a bridge for troops, it is an aqueduct. And the thing Sennacherib caused to pass over it is not soldiers, it is the water itself. 2 days later, a well-preserved copy of the inscription came out of the ground on the north side of the structure. They cleaned the salt off the signs and read it. "Those waters I caused to pass over upon it." The peasant's story had told them what the monument was, 2 days before the monument told them itself. They went looking for more, and here they hit something interesting about how folklore survives. The villagers didn't want to tell them. The excavators wrote that the men seemed to consider this kind of story childish and beneath their dignity. Ali, the headman, preferred his dam. When asked directly whether he knew any stories about the bridge, he said no. Only when pressed, "I have heard a story about a king who promised his daughter to whoever could bring water," did he admit it. And even then, with a caveat. Yes, there is a story like that, but that is no good. So they got the tale out of him, piece by piece. He pointed at a bystander's white linen trousers to explain what the sheets looked like, and then the archaeologist asked where the water was supposed to have come from. "A man called Garib," answered, and he did not hesitate. "From Hines, and then by the Gomel to Gurginji, then to Mamrashan, and to here, to Jerwan, and after Jerwan, to Bakasra, and to Baitnar, and after that, to Mahmudan perhaps, and then they don't say." 6 place names in order, recited from memory by a farmer in a village where, as the headman put it when asked why nobody knew the king's name, "We have nobody who can write, and we have no books, so people tell from one to another, and they forget." They had forgotten the king. They had forgotten it was Assyrian. They had forgotten what the stones were for, and had settled on a dam. They had not forgotten where the water went. And the excavators tested it. After the dig closed, they spent a few days walking the route the story described. At Shifsharin, 1,500 meters east of the village, a small wadi had cut across the ground and exposed a cross-section. Blocks of the same white limestone used at Jerwan, still in position, showing a canal about 19 meters wide. At Bakasra, the same stone showing through the turf, and a terrace cut into the hillside. Beyond Jerwan they lost it, then picked it up again near Piran, a level artificial terrace 22 meters across, so clear that the grass changed color along the line on either side of it, because the ground underneath was different. The canal was where the story said it was. This is what makes Jerwan worth knowing about, and it is not the engineering. A king built a canal in the 7th century BC to water his capital. The capital fell. The empire fell. The language died and stayed dead for 2,500 years. The people living on top of the thing lost the king's name, the empire's name, and the purpose of the stones. What survived was a love story about linen sheets, and inside it, like a fossil, the root of the water, 6 villages in the correct order, still being recited in the 1930s by men who thought the whole thing was slightly embarrassing. The archaeologists had the inscription and read it wrong. The farmers had no writing at all and got the crucial part right. Then they don't say. That is where the memory ends. Everything before that held for 100 generations. Subscribe for more history that got buried.